Yeah. Okay.
Welcome everybody and happy St David's Day. I hope you're all having a good one. Very serious reports to consider today, so I think we'll crack on. Welcome everybody on screen. Do we have any apologies for absence?
No apologies.
On the matters before us, do we have any declarations of interest? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so I'll bring us on to item 3, the revenue and capital budget for 2023 to 24, the final proposals following scrutiny and public consultation. And that's over to you, Councillor Garrett.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really need it, don't I? So I'd like to start by congratulating Cabinet and officers on this budget. It's been a Herculean effort in a time of amazing adversity. When our midterm financial planning predicted a £26 million additional cost pressure, it's accurate to say that we've not seen a challenge like this in the history of Monmouthshire County Council. You have to go back to the days of the 70s to see inflation rivaling the 14% RPI that we've seen in the last year. With that, we'll produce a budget which gives council tax set significantly below inflation at 5.95%. That's inflation busting in terms of the inquiries made in this room some months ago by the opposition about double figure increases. We see increases of £500,000 in our cost of living fund, in addition to the funds supplied by Welsh Government. We're providing a net increase of over 5% in schools budgets, and we're providing a £5.4 million increase in health and social care. We're providing a budget which, in the balance of the requirements of unprecedented pressures, delivers core services for our county and our community through an extensive and comprehensive set of savings. This is a budget which has tripled consultation within the community on last year's performance. So, colleagues, when I introduced this budget in our previous Cabinet meeting, I laid out our consultation process. I can say that we have taken the budget to the community in every population centre in Monmouthshire. And also, we have carried out online consultation. Engagement on consultation has increased compared to last year, and it has tripled. Moreover, recognising that we are a minority administration and taking the experience from other minorities administrations on advice from people who have and are sitting in them, it's normal to discuss budgets with other groups beyond the bare minimum of attending scrutiny committees. So I have opened my doors to other councillors and groups across the council. I specifically held open door sessions and invited discussion. It has been disappointing to know that beyond an initial discussion with one group, these have been actively avoided, and leaders have specifically stated that they will not meet or talk to me as the portfolio holder. I found this, as I know you did, disappointing in terms of the duty of all elected councillors to work for the people that elected them to secure a budget for their council. And I sincerely hope that this duty will weigh heavily on councillors at the budget meeting for council. However, we have listened to the feedback from our residents and the opinion of members expressed in scrutiny, and I can highlight the following changes to the original proposals. First and foremost, we understand that adult social care is a challenging area and that the proposed savings in this area were a stretch target, and that stretch target is in an area which we are not comfortable with. We are therefore making an additional £1 million reserves call to increase funding in this area by that £1 million. Additionally, there shall be no alteration to opening hours of our hubs and our libraries as a result of this budget. This budget shall not mandate early closures of leisure centres as previously specified, and I would hope that, Richard, you're content with this, as it will no longer affect your swim times. And I certainly hope that you don't find yourself swimming in an empty pool at any point as a result of this. Our proposals to restructuring additional learning needs teams have been overcome, and they have been removed from this budget. There is the increase on home to school transport, which was proposed to bring the service into a cost neutral position, was a large increase which placed pressure on families who are feeling the cost of living crisis. We therefore are removing this increase and continuing to subsidise this service. Additionally, we've reviewed proposals on breakfast clubs and their impact on larger families and will maintain costs for second children and children beyond second children at £1 per session. We will therefore be continuing to offer heavily subsidised childcare to working families in order to facilitate our communities in their ability to work and raise income for their own families. In terms of transport, we're also removing the recommendations to increase the subscription for our grassroots service. This again means that we will be subsidising it in order to maintain low-cost travel to our rural areas and to enhance the connectivity of our county. Additionally, we're placing energies and colleagues. Additionally, we're placing savings from energy cost predictions, which have started to come down back into our schools' budgets. Savings to facilitate this have been made as we improve the granularity of our financial planning as we arrive closer to 2023's financial year. Specific areas of notable savings that you will note are predicted reduction in energy costs and of treasury costs. Also, a review of our SRS contribution, which is now lower, the Welsh Government Radical Reform Grant, and these have been balanced by additional costs that we also see adding to that granularity in terms of ALM transport, social care and health pressures, increases in foster care rates, and an increase in software licensing costs. And so, in summary, we have a budget. It is one that is responsive and responsible and gives a full and robust response to the unprecedented economic challenges that we face as a council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Sobering, but I think we are, all of us, very proud that we have been responsive, that we have listened, and we've followed our principles that we've laid out very quickly, very clearly, that we will do our best despite the climate that we find ourselves in across the UK, not just in Wales, much of which is beyond our control, that we will always look to reduce inequalities within our county, to protect the vulnerable, and to do what we can to contribute to ending the climate and nature crises. I will open it up to comments from climate. I am aware that Councillor John has some questions. I'm also aware that tomorrow we have the extremely important action of working as council together to set a budget that we believe is a responsible one and one that is meeting the needs of our residents in a period of what can only be described, I think, as economic and social turmoil brought on by external events from Westminster, Ukraine, the cost of living crisis, and we're still in a huge period of uncertainty. So if you have any observations, Cabinet, please do. Councillor Birch.
Obviously, we are responding to unprecedented cost pressures and also moving quite rapidly to redesign services to provide better value for money without removing services in any of our counties. But would you care to comment on the level of reserves that leaves us with? And obviously that's going to need some very tight budgetary management over the next year, I believe.
Absolutely. I think for this, it would be sensible if I actually join the meeting and cast an image for you. If you bear with me 2 seconds, I will join the room as if through the wonders of.
There was a moment there, Councillor Garrick. I thought we'd sent a hologram.
Not quite that far advanced yet. Sorry, I keep saying chair. I'm in the wrong meeting. I clearly am. So let me. So if we look at this and we make this a little bigger, move our faces out of the way. So this is where we are and have been since 2008. So as you can see, there has been a general trend of running down reserves during the austerity period. And this is a very, very sad function of many local governments' finances, in that austerity over the last 12 years has stripped out council funding, and you do see lower levels of reserves, which has been hit particularly hard. You'll see here from 2019 to 2020 through to 2022 a spike. That is the result of principally Welsh Government funding through the pandemic to allow additional funds to councils to cope with the pandemic. And I have mentioned throughout the year, when we're talking about our in-year shortfalls, the preferred effect of this funding now stopping. Unfortunately, that has come at the same time as unprecedented inflation rates. We sat at 14% for our PI. I think we're still there. We're at about 10.1% at the last publication of CPI. And that, along with a whole host of issues, from escalated oil and then gas prices, full employment, which has put pressure on our jobs market, increased need for council services through the pandemic and post-pandemic, has meant we've got a high level of need and demand, which has cost us over £9 million shortfall in this financial year. And we are having to make a reserves call on it. And unfortunately, those reserves, through economic policies, locally and nationally, means that they are not greatly inflated. So we are taking a significant chunk of our reserves. If you look at our council fund reserve cover here, under the blue, you'll see that where we stand here is 4.9%, which is not different, not very far different from where we have stood for the entirety of the last 10 years until we got to the pandemic. And I also note that it's actually an increase in the earlier part of the graph, where we were at 3.8%. So we are in a position where our reserves are low. We have to make the necessary call on them because it is a rainy day. And we do now need to go forwards into the next financial year, planning clearly on how we can increase our reserves. It's unfortunate. I would have liked to see reserve strategy over previous years bring us to a point where we weren't just relying on pandemic funding, but this is where we are, and this is, this is the position that we have inherited, and this is the position that we will now manage ourselves out of.
Thank you. Sobering, Councillor Garrett. As you say, given the situation that we find ourselves in, like every other council across the UK, we are left with very little option, I think. Is there any other observations or comments from Councillor Griffiths?
Thank you, Chair.
Leader.
It is more of a comment than a question.
Favourite kinds of questions.
That's right. But when I do look at the figures and look through the report, the challenge we've all been faced, we face the Cabinet, the Council will face tomorrow, is that our costs are projected to rise by 14% in the coming year. Our major source of revenue, the grant from Welsh Government, will only rise by just over 9%. We're proposing an increase in council tax of 5.9%. Whichever way you look at that, there's going to be a 5% cut in real spending. And the challenge before us is how we can achieve that 5% cut in the real value of our spending whilst protecting our citizens. Like every member of this Cabinet, we've looked and looked and looked at all the proposals before us. And it is in all honesty that I cannot see any better way of squaring that circle that's before us. It's not going to be. It hasn't been easy for us. But what I think we should acknowledge is that it's not going to be easy for our staff, and they're going to have to go into the next year with expectations of maintaining services when all around them the real value of their budgets are being cut. And we shouldn't shy away from saying to our citizens that it's not going to be easy for them. They have their needs, they have their expectations, and no matter how hard we've tried to protect them, they are going to see the services provide them curtailed by the circumstances that we're in. So I think this is as good as it gets, and I take pride in being able to offer this budget as a member of the Cabinet to the Council. And as the Council considers that budget, which it will do tomorrow, it seems to me that it cannot avoid the context. The money available to us is limited. The costs are increasing. We have to achieve that 5% real cut. And in truth, I can't see any better way of achieving it than the budget that Councillor Garrick has put before us today.
Thanks, Councillor Griffiths. I couldn't agree more. And I think as I travelled around Monmouthshire over January and February in tandem with Councillor Garrick, I was quite humbled actually to hear so many residents, which was reinforced from knocking on doors in my own ward and other wards and attending public meetings, of how much our residents understand the almost impossible and unbelievable situation that local councils across Wales have been placed, and whatever the politics of the council, the sheer pain of having to make decisions which no council wants to make about the services that they offer to their residents. Having said that as well, there is anger that we are in this position, great anger in this position, and wanting to cast blame. And I'm relieved that it's not being cast at local authorities. And so as a local authority, we do have the opportunity, I think, to build on the willingness of the residents to absolutely work in partnership with us and with our other partners in communities, in business, across councils and the Welsh Government, to take us forward over the next 2-3 years, where there is no end in sight at the moment. But we're all adults and we all know there will be changes. We will come through this period. The point is that we go forward with purpose, and we go forward with a clear sense that this budget is putting us in the right direction. And I think the work that our staff have done with Councillor Garrick has certainly put us on that sure footing. If there aren't no more questions from Cabinet members, I'll bring in Councillor John here, who's very kindly got a set of questions that he'd like to put to you, Councillor Garrick. Shall we take them one?
I have. Thank you, Leader, and I'll take them in a slightly different order, if that's
right,
okay.
Folks. You don't call me chair.
Thank you for the presentation, and I welcome some of the changes in the revised budget. I think some of the changes you've made are really sensible. Absolutely support the ditching of what was proposed originally for the grassroots bus service. I thought the 3,000% proposed increase in the pavement cafe licenses was a terrible idea, so I think you've done the right thing in dropping that. And I welcome, given that considering we're at a time coming out of the pandemic and the importance of people looking after their mental and physical well-being, I absolutely welcome the changes you've announced to the draft budget on leisure centre opening times. However, there are some of the changes that don't make sense to me. So on the Breakfast Club charges, you've announced a new position that only one child in families of multiple children will pay. It feels very unclear as to which if you're a family of three children, who pays. It's not clear from the proposal. If you've got one child ill, who pays in that situation? So it feels like you've made a knee-jerk decision to try to mitigate the impact of a bad decision, whereas it might have been easier just to ditch the bad decision. So what were your considerations in deciding which of those draft budget proposals to drop, please?
Oh, I have this, thank you. So, yeah, in terms of which areas that we decided, we used our brag ratings in how we selected our budget proposals. So we looked at our organisational viability, our legal risk, our deliverability, our impact on equality, our impact on climate adaptivity, and our impact on issues already highlighted in the strategic risk register. Moreover, we looked at the areas where we were gathering feedback and where we felt that there was significant arguments and presented to respond to those where we could.
Okay, thank you. When we debated the budget previously, I did express some concern that it felt like the budget disproportionately targeted children and young people. The latest iteration of the Community and Corporate Plan has addressed the need to support particularly vulnerable children who've been affected by the pandemic. How do you think the budget helps achieve that goal?
I think I'm going to give your voice a bit of a rest as we go.
It's going to be a long night.
And I'm going to ask, because this cuts across two portfolios, I'm going to ask Councillor Brocup first. And if you have anything to add, Councillor Thomas, please do so.
Thanks for the question, Councillor John. And it's already been hinted at, I think, but let me be quite clear that as far as my directorate is concerned, I appreciate that we are a minority administration in this county. And right from the start, we have said that we work together with other partners for the best for our people in Monmouthshire. I hope that works two ways, and that during debates tomorrow, you will be quite prepared to admit that your party has played some not inconsiderable part in putting us into the difficulties that we now face. So to give you what I hope is a clear answer, we are obviously in an exceptionally challenging period in which we've had to take very difficult decisions. Were you in power, you would have been in a similar position to us and would have had to have made those very difficult decisions as well. It's included looking at areas where we would not have wanted to look to make savings. However, having said that, I will always stand by the fact that our schools have had a budget uplift of 5%. And that was quite an achievement for us to be able to achieve that. We've also said that we will meet the increased costs of the salaries of people who work in our schools, which might be quite considerable by the end of the situation nationally that we find ourselves in at the moment. And obviously the Teachers' Pay Award is subject to ongoing national negotiations. But in order to meet wider organisational position, the schools have been asked to contribute 2.8% of their total budget, so that across the board, we, in a sense, are sharing the pain. And my colleague, Councillor Thomas, particularly looking at the impact of where we are on children. I know that the children who our staff care for all day in schools go home from schools to face difficulties in their home situations as well. And we've got to see this thing in the round. And we've asked schools to help in that by a 2.8% top slice. We've afforded schools all of the protection we can to ensure that they're able to continue provide education and well-being support for learners. And we know that that's vital for an excellent start in life. And we have said right from the outset that unless you get things right from the start, things won't just become right in later life. To support our most vulnerable learners, we will actually be putting in an extra £597,000, well over £500,000, to support school placements and provide more staff so that we can enhance and develop provision in our special needs resource bases. So despite the cuts and the savings that we are having to make because of the situation we find ourselves in, I think there is very clear evidence that we are making a determined start to introduce our manifesto commitments. Thanks.
Have you anything to add?
Yes.
Particularly vulnerable.
Yeah.
I am aware you had your hand up, Councillor Maybe. Do you want to come in after Councillor Thomas?
It was with respect to the previous question, so I'm happy to come in if there's time at the end. Thank you. Thanks, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Thanks for the question, Councillor John. You know, from a social care perspective, I've looked over it again this afternoon, and I note that the savings proposals within children's services do not impact on early help and family support services. There are no proposals within the social care budget to reduce preventative support, and in fact I think that is one of our key drivers as we go forward into next year. Across adult and children is working on prevention, so there is no cut there. Schools are supported in their overall approach to pupil well-being, as Councillor Groper has said, through initiatives, and also there is money from the Regional Partnership Board, and obviously I sit on that board. Individual vulnerable learners continue to have access to school-based counselling, and then they can be referred either into our Wellbeing Partnership panel to access a wide range of support services, or into the integrated health pathway for children with developmental concerns. So as far as I'm concerned, there is no cut there. There is more money going into the children's services budget generally, which I'll talk about tomorrow in full council, but absolutely no cut in support for vulnerable children in schools and elsewhere. Thanks.
If I may, let's bring in Councillor Maybe, who's been very patient, and then I'll bring you in.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. It's probably dropping in the previous subject in a strange way, but I just wanted to respond to the question about the choice of things that we changed during the consultation on the budget and our original plans. One of them particularly mentioned was the grassroots service. We were already painfully aware of the rising cost of providing bus services, but during this period we received new news about the phasing out of the emergency support for buses, and that was why we felt this is really the wrong time to increase costs for grassroots. So it was a very specific reaction to increased pressures on our existing bus services and concerns about the vulnerability of rural residents in particular on that point. So sorry, that's slightly odd in the middle of the discussion around education, but I just wanted to raise that point. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a useful explanation for Councillor John, because it does highlight one of the externalities over which we have very little control, but it's going to have a lot of impact on our residents, and one of which Councillor Maybe, along with officers, is really spending a lot of time on lobbying and building the evidence for how we can maintain and in some ways extend rural bus services. But there is a lot of work that needs to do with with both the UK government and the Welsh government on this. Councillor John and everyone in the room and online will know that buses have come to the top of the agenda across the UK in a matter of weeks, really. Councillor Birch, you wanted to come in.
It was just to say that we're very conscious of the contribution which Model Life makes to the well-being of vulnerable children. Whilst we're still awaiting confirmation of some Welsh Government funding, would anticipate that the play, youth and other services which have generally continued through the summer holidays and supported young people's well-being will continue and indeed be developed. There are some minor reorganisations of services in train, but certainly no cuts in that provision.
Good point, Councillor Birch. I was very pleased to see the work that's been going on in Gilwern Outdoor Centre to make sure that it's inclusive and supporting the well-being and needs of young, vulnerable, disabled adults and children. And that has been ongoing since early summer, has it not, Councillor Birch?
Yes,
And will continue into next year.
Increasing role in supporting young people and in some cases in cost avoidance, and that's something that we look to develop.
Anyway, we move on. You have a further question.
I do. Thank you for those contributions. My last question is about the council tax rise that you're proposing, which is much higher than all the similarly rural neighbouring authorities. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, I'd like to point out that the question comes from a very strange place. Our council tax is set on the position of Monmouthshire and the position of our mid-term financial planning. We established the need for council tax based on what we are doing in Monmouthshire and the unique situation of Monmouthshire. Each council is unique and has unique issues that it needs to address. And our council tax is tailored specifically for Monmouthshire. But if we do want to do a comparison, we can look, for instance, at two issues. One, we established to know that in the case of Monmouthshire, we have a higher level of council tax based on our values of properties, and therefore the anticipation is that we will raise more funds from our council tax income. Secondly, we need to go back to that piece on the reserves position. We are set in the lowest quartile of councils in Wales in terms of reserves. Of those, we rank amongst Merthyr and Torfaen, who are not neighbouring rural councils, and then Conwy and Anglesey, who are rural councils. When you look at Anglesey, they're proposing around a 5% increase, which is within less than 1% of our proposal. When you then go to Conwy, you're looking at, I believe, a minimum of 7%. So for the level of reserves that we have been gifted as an administration, we are, as a rural county, in the middle of that particular boarding.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I didn't drop a stitch.
I wouldn't expect otherwise. We haven't been dropping any stitches throughout this budget process. It's always for the good. If we have no any questions, and I don't think we do, thank you very much for these questions. I think they've allowed Councillor Garris to clarify some of the issues that you find slightly perplexing. I hope you're no longer perplexed. I suggest we go to recommendations. I think because of the seriousness of this cabinet, I'd like to take them one by one and just make sure that Nick is clear about how we're voting on these. So the first recommendation is for us to consider the responses and that we are recommending both the budget and the capital programme in the appendix. And I think we're all agreed on that.
Yes.
The second one is that we are recommending a 5.95% increase in Band D equivalent council tax. We all agreed, council?
Yeah.
Cabinet rather. 2.3, we approve changes to proposed savings and pressures updated following public consultation. I think it's clear that we do.
Yes.
For 2.4, that we approve the proposed changes to the capital programme.
Yes.
2.5, that we recommend to the undertaking a review of property assets to identify assets which are underutilised, where costs can be reduced, income increased, and sites repurposed or redeveloped to meet the objectives set out in the community and corporate plan. I've read that out in full because it's very significant, I think, to the purposefulness of this budget and how it aligns to our strategic endeavours under the community and corporate plan. Are we agreed?
Yes.
2.6, that we consider the report on the robustness of the budget process and the adequacy of reserves. Are we agreed? I think we're well aware of the position that we're in, but I think Councillor Garris has laid out very clearly what we need to do to ensure financial probity in the following year. 2.7, we adopt the report on prudential indicators.
Yes.
2.8, and you'll know, Cabinet, we had long discussions over this because of our concerns of the broader context that we're having to operate in now, along with every other council. So that we're asking for more regular budget monitoring and scrutiny, that we strengthen the way that we monitor and report, that a financial strategy is developed, and we see that being done with urgency, and is accompanied by a medium-term financial plan, and that we have regular under review taken of the medium-term financial plan throughout the following year. We agreed?
Yeah.
Thanks, Council. That was quite a sobering discussion to take ourselves through.
I've got more.
I know, we haven't finished yet. So carry on knitting, Councillor Garrick. Number 4, which is also brings it to you, is the Monmouthshire Farm School Trust Fund and Welsh Church Trust Fund investment and fund strategies.
Okay. Thank you, Leader. So, colleagues, this paper brings forward the Monmouthshire Farm School Trust Fund and the Welsh Church Funds and Trust Fund investments and their strategies. And we're asking that we approve them and then delegate to our CEO and Deputy CEO for their administration. So we're looking to approve our 23 to 24 grants allocation to local authority beneficiaries to the Monmouthshire Welsh Church Pact Fund of £200,000, which we will distribute in accordance with the population data which is included in the report. So we also note that the Monmouthshire Farm School Trust Board terminated their grant for 24 to 24 back in July 2022, and that this is sequentially reviewed throughout each meeting to ensure that it is kept appropriate. I'll point out to you that the contract for the position of Treasury Advisor to Monmouthshire County Council, the Welsh Church Act Fund and the Monmouthshire Farm School Endowment Trust was awarded to Arlen First Limited in March 2021, and that spans for 4 years. Those mechanisms and risks for that contract are included in the report, and I'm content that the arrangement does continue, and I hope that you are too. As I mentioned, for the financial year of 21 to 22, the Welsh Church Fund received an income of £193,856 from its external investments funds and its rental income. Therefore, the report recommends that we distribute £200,000 to ensure that the funds raised for charitable purposes in 21 to 22 during the period of the pandemic are distributed fully and thereby assist grant recipients in need of financial support and without a further depletion of capital assets. The fund, you'll note, was also saw an increase in income received from pooled funds, which was augmented by a paper net capital gain of £349,668. That's against a gain of £422,752 in 2020 to 2021. Turning to the Farms Trust, in the financial year of 21 to 22, which is the most recent completed year-end accounts, the Monmouthshire Farmers Trust received income of £23,448 from its direct investments in funds and £4,716 from the Roger Edwards Educational Trust Fund. Those total investment returns were more than the grants and fees allocated to the from the trust, and so could have potentially increased the funds available for distribution in 23 to 24. So the trustees have agreed to maintain grants available to £30,000 in 23 to 24. These are the headlines of this paper, and I will hand back to you because we do have a lot of business this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Gareth. I don't think there's anything particularly controversial on this one, and I must say, as a new councillor as well as new leader, it's been rather delightful to discover these trust funds and the good that they do, and to recognise that small pockets of money can make an enormous difference to communities across Monmouthshire, and how welcome it is to know that we as a council are managing these funds. There's very clear recommendations. On this case, I'm not going to read them out, but I am going to ask Cabinet, are we in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. So
we should note our thanks to the Liberal government of 1906 for establishing the Welsh Church.
Thanks to Lloyd George.
Absolutely. In the absence of a fully functioning Labour Party that's only just starting, we can always thank the Liberals in the early part of the 20th century, especially Lloyd George, the Welshman. So that brings us back to, goodness me, Councillor Garrick.
I'm just going to get a glass of sip of water, if that's okay, Chair, at this stage. I've got my own.
Speaking of which, I think I'll have some. Let's make sure we don't pour it over your head.
So, colleagues, we are now returning to the in-year shortfall, which, as you know, stood at over £9 million. So this is our month 9 outturn, and the updated forecast represents a net improvement of £1.62 million since our last forecast. However, this is driven primarily by incorporating the service budget recovery plan that had been identified in our month 6 into the forecast. And that has improved our overall forecast by £1.83 million. It's important to note that we also have seen deterioration in service forecast between month 6 and month 9 in that quarter, and that's of £202,000, principally those are due to a further net increase in expenditure of around £67,000 in children's services, where we're aware that there are costly emergency arrangements in place and that they continue despite stable overall numbers of looked after children. We're also seeing a £240,000 additional ALN transport pressure due to operators being given a percentage increase due to rising fuel costs. A shortfall of £360,000 has been identified against service recovery target of 2.185 billion, with the deficit primarily falling within social care. You'll note within the budget that we did previously consider the position of social care and our increased allocations that we have now proposed. In terms of budget recovery, you do have the update in the paper, and our overall revenue budget outturns currently forecast would need to be subsidised by £3.4 million of capital receipts, which we are using to fund identified eligible expenditure under the flexible use of capitalised receipts directive. However, we have reviewed our initial intentions under the capitalisation directive, and we've demonstrated that the entire call that we wish to make on that does not fully qualify, and as such we are now looking to make a significant call on reserves. So in that case, we have our budget recovery plan, which is now updated. That's in table 3 of the report, and we're projecting that we will be drawing down revenue reserves of £6.06 million to ensure that we have a balanced outturn position at the end of year. That's a 1.06 million increase in the contribution anticipated in the support of this budgetary plan. I was planning at this stage to discuss review reserves. However, I have already done that. Thank you very much, Councillor Birch. So I'm going to skip that part of this intended piece. We do need to understand those risks, and they are significant in terms of where we are sitting, and we have spoken about that already. And we're therefore looking at a capital outturn spend of 61.8 million as outlined in Appendix 1. And that currently indicates a forecast overspend of 183,000, which we note continuing difficulty in delivering our capital projects to their allocated budget in the current challenging economic environment. And you've all heard me speak about the areas that are affected here, from material shortages to increases in material costs and a very full job market, which means it is difficult to get human resources as well as material resources. In terms of risk, we understand fully where we are. We've been following and tracking our progress on the budget that we inherited over the last year. I do need to mention schools reserves. Sorry, I didn't mean to lubricate my throat, so I've got to that point of the evening. So I do need to mention school reserves, and you will find that in table 6 of the report and also in appendices 1 and 3. And it highlights the possibility of a further 9 schools entering deficit reserve position by the end of the financial year. Those of you who have lived through the previous council or followed that council will be aware that this is not an entirely new position for Monmouthshire, and schools have unfortunately been in deficit before. We have talked about the deficit to an extent already this evening when talking about the budget itself. We also note and have discussed at length in this meeting and previous meetings the volatile nature of health and social care, both in adults and children's services. We therefore require that the respective chief officers and the responsible financial officer go forward to continually and closely monitor and manage our operational and financial performance in those areas to ensure that any possible remedial actions can be taken, and that we can constrain cost, and that it is reported to me as the portfolio holder regularly. That is the up and the down of this outturn report. May I hand back to you, please, Lida?
Yes, you may, Councillor Garrick. Are there any observations from Cabinet?
Mr. Garrick, you did refer to the impact of the increases in expenditure on social care, but I would just like to focus on that and perhaps challenge it a bit further, because it seems to me to be a very significant factor in this year's budget and in future budgets. Our overspend this year, total overspend, was is projected to be 7.5 million. 5.7 million of that, about 3/4 of it, is as a result of the projected overspend in social care. So it's driving the circumstances that we're in. It's a 10%, 9.9% overspend. It's affected next year's budget in that we've had to adjust our base on children's services in particular, and the cash increase in children's services next year is going to be around over 19%. So we had a question earlier what we were doing to protect children. A 19% increase in the budget for children's services next year is in part a reaction to that, but it's also a reaction to the market in the provision of care for complex cases, complex residential cases. And I suppose I'm asking Councillor Garrick, Councillor Thomas, whether they agree with me that what we're witnessing is a broken market in the provision of this care. A broken market which I suspect this authority should have anticipated over the last decade. It's not happened over the last year, it's been happening over a period of years. And I don't think we've responded to it well. Look into it, and what you see is a number of primarily private equity firms have been buying up the market. They've been concentrating provision and using their control of that market to substantially increase profit margins. It's a market where profits are being generated at the expense of the most vulnerable. So I ask, perhaps primarily Councillor Thomas, whether he would agree with me that we can only break this cycle by working with other local authorities to create new forms of provision, to create regional alternatives in the supply of care. We could have been doing this over the last decade, we haven't been. But I think this is now one of the most urgent challenges before us. It's probable that the vehicle to achieve this is our regional arrangements, the Regional Partnership Board. But if there has been a period of reflection on this problem, then I think reflection should end and action should start. And that board and all our partner local authorities have actually got to make the change happen. We've got to put in place. It can't happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Alternative forms of provision. If we don't do that, we'll continue to live the legacy that we've inherited as an administration and be in hock to this broken market.
Thanks, Councillor Griffiths. I share your concerns, and obviously, I was not responsible from 10 years ago. I've obviously been responsible since last May, and as you rightly say, that the market is very much dominated by private providers, and it won't be just a case of, as it were, our choice. We will be driven by the legislation of Welsh Government, which over the 2 to 3 years going forward, under the Eliminate agenda, will force local authorities not to use private providers in terms of childcare placements, and particularly very complex ones. It does beg the question then, in terms of adult social care, it's been pushed almost entirely into private providers with care homes and so on. But yeah, I share your concerns, and certainly this is something that my Chief Officer, Jane Roger, and I've been discussing and moving on in terms of things like prevention, but also in terms of establishing provision. We've established one provision now for a particularly challenging adolescent, which is extremely expensive, but we have a statutory obligation to provide care for that adolescent, and we cannot, in a sense, reject that. We cannot say we're not doing it. Certainly, since I've joined the Regional Partnership Board, I'd like to think I've taken an active part in discussion. And in fact, I had a discussion about a week ago with Anne Lloyd, who's the chair of the Regional Partnership Board, touching on a number of issues, but this one as well. And to be honest, it's a challenge, not just for us. If you look at Cardiff City, they've had to put in 23 million in terms of extra funding across their social services budget, and much of that is at the lower end, as it were, in children's services. So, as far as I'm concerned, it does concern me in terms of the overspend, but that is something that I inherited to a certain degree. It's quite difficult to reduce a large overspend. I don't think anybody else sitting around this table has faced that challenge in the last 7 or 8 months. But certainly that is a key factor in terms of my agenda and the agenda of the Chief Officer, that we work with other authorities to provide provision. We work within this authority to provide some provision, which we've already done. But at a more basic level, since I've taken over, we've driven a much more localised marketing drive for foster parents, because you're paying huge amounts to independent foster agencies. I think I looked at figures today. Moving into this year, instead of having 19 children going to independent foster agencies, we've had 4. And that is a huge saving, but also, more importantly, it is for the benefit of the young person or the child. You know, personally, I want to see children and young people who are born and brought up in Monmouthshire or come into the authority actually being looked after and cared for within Monmouthshire, not being sent, you know, to wherever across the border or other parts of Wales. So that the current situation, yes, is very much in my mind, it's in my Chief Officer's mind, and certainly now in terms of the monthly sort of budgetary meetings. I've spoken to the Section 151 officer, Peter Davis, after the last feedback on the large sort of deficit that we've accrued, that jointly with him, we will be monitoring now in terms of costs that we have to incur, and also a much stronger plan in terms of reviewing each, particularly the specialist care provision, reviewing each placement and looking at a much clearer move-on plan for young people, so that they don't have to stay in extremely expensive provision when perhaps they've progressed, and they can move into provision which is better for them, but is also not taking up as many care workers over a period of time. So, you know, be reassured that I hope that as we move forward into the next budgetary year, that will start to come down. But personally, I think, you know, in terms of making significant dents into that deficit, it is only by working with the 4 other authorities in Gwent, because we do not have, as it were, large numbers of children needing specialist provision, and it's not cost effective to perhaps set up provision for, say, 1 child, but it is cost effective working with the 4 other authorities to, say, provide provision for 5 or 6 children. So, you know, I'm not resting on my laurels and letting the debt accrue. There is a definite plan, and key factor in that is prevention as much as anything, not being in a position where children come in to keep them as much as possible with preventative measures, keep them within families. Better for the child, better for the authority.
Thank you.
May I as well just point out that in terms of that spend as well, we are very much mid-range in Wales in terms of that spend.
Right.
We've done some research which we're continuing, but it does appear that our outlay in the area is very much middle of the pack. We're not an outlier in terms of it. It's very much systemic throughout the country.
But the pack might be out of control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well put, Councillor Griffiths. I think when the Minister, Julie Morgan, came to visit, she made that point herself, but she also made the point that, and I would congratulate our officers on this, that Monmouthshire was moving ahead very strongly on the transformation, elimination and redesign agenda, which every Welsh council is engaged in. And thanks to you, Councillor Thomas, because we talk in those abstract terms, don't we, about redesign, transformation, eliminate, but you've given us a real insight of what that means to the child, what that means to the service, and what we're actually doing to make those changes that benefit the most vulnerable and really do put prevention front left and centre in the work of our social care for children. So thanks for that, Councillor Thomas. If there's no other observation of, come in.
May I just give credit? There are many areas of our the month 9 figures which are we can really see in these figures the hard work of officers across the authority during the implementing budget recovery plans, which have significantly improved the position since month 4. So I would just like to say thank you, and I'm pleased to note that in particular in Mon Life. And also it's great where in some cases where we have been across Wales experiencing budgetary pressures, the Welsh Government has stepped in with additional funding, as has been the case with regard to the housing and homelessness sector. So it's not all gloom and doom.
No, not at all. And I think much of that was recognised in scrutiny. As you'll know, Cabinet, this report has already been to scrutiny, who are understanding of the situation that the council finds itself in, and had no major recommendations to make. Recognised the sterling work that our officers have been doing to make the savings that we saw necessary in month 6. On that note, I'll bring in Councillor John, because you've got 2 more questions that you'd like.
I have. Thank you, Leader. First, can I come back to school budgets and the 9 schools that are projected to go into deficit? What support's already being provided to these schools, and when does the Cabinet member expect schools to return to a positive balance, please?
I'll pass that again to you, Councillor Grocott. I know you've been in lots of discussions with schools over the last few weeks or so.
Thank you, Leader. It's obviously disappointing that 9 schools are projecting now to go into. However, 2 of the schools have got deficits that are under £10,000, which is very manageable, and they'll recover very quickly, we anticipate. Of the remaining 7, 1 has a significant deficit, and I and Councillor Garrick have, together with officers, have met with the head teacher and finance officer at the school. We're very close to agreeing a long-term recovery plan to allow the school to recover over a period of time while maintaining standards. And in fact, the school is currently working extremely hard to do this, and is producing some excellent academic results at the same time. So it's heartening to note that academic standards, which is what we're looking for in schools, and care standards for pupils have not suffered while they have been wrestling with a budget deficit at the same time. But certainly we have agreed a way forward with that one particular school, and already we're beginning to see considerable improvement there. Of the remaining schools, a number of grants were provided by the Welsh Government at the end of the 21-22 financial year, and these had the impact of inflating the year-end balances. But the downside was that the grants had to be spent within the current financial year in which they were awarded, and that's why there was that significant reduction in schools' budgets. All schools facing a deficit at the moment will need to agree a recovery plan with the governing body and with the local authority. And these schools have received enhanced financial support from our finance team to ensure they're on track to recover as quickly as possible. And I'm not the first person tonight to thank our officers, but certainly at a time when I was a chair of a governing body that was in deficit, the support we had from finance team at county was tremendous, and helped us to recover very quickly. So every school has developed a plan. and is being supported in getting out of that as quickly as possible.
Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And the last question, I wanted to go back to the reserve position, and Councillor Garrick already alluded to the risks associated with the low level of reserves in the presentation. And indeed, the paper refers to the risks to the financial sustainability of the council. The graph you showed us earlier shows certainly the biggest and fastest fall in reserves in recent history. So how concerned is the Cabinet about the Council's financial resilience following these raids on reserves, please? Thank you.
On reserves is a bit of histrionic there, to be honest. It is an appropriate usage of reserves given the budgetary position that we're in. I've already lamented the fact that there has been running down of reserves until the point of the last few years during the pandemic, when additional funding was made available from Welsh Government. In terms of our current position, we take it incredibly seriously. We understand exactly where those risks are, and it's our intention to build up reserves going forwards. We are at the point where those reserves needed to be used. We would prefer not to go as low as we are. However, those reserves just did not exist. We will be putting in place measures to build up our reserves going forward, as any responsible council should.
Thanks, Councillor Garrett. I would note that one of the previous leaders of the council, who's now our esteemed MS, has been making a very valid point, he would argue, in Senedd, that councils need to use their reserves in moments of crisis that we face, and should not be sitting on them. And I think that's something we'd agree with him in our case. Given that this has been through scrutiny, and we had an opportunity to discuss it in the context of the revision of the budget, I'm not going to read out the 10 recommendations, but I'm asking Cabinet, do we agree?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks very much. So moving on to item 6, which I'm very keen to hear on, because I think it's a delightful outcome for Monmouthshire, and I'm going to preempt everyone. It feels like a love fest for our officers, but given the testing times we've been in for the last 6 months or so, then I think it's warranted, because the amount of work that Francis O'Brien and Kath Fallon and Deborah Hills-Howells have put into bringing a programme which is in its 4th iteration into a shape which really does not only support our residents, but support our local economy, and start to put the meat on what we mean by foundational economy, circular economy, and growing a sustainable economy that's green within the county. So it is a bit of a preempt, but I would just like to say thank you very much, and to the 2 officers concerned, Councillor Birch, who led on it, and Councillor Maybe, who put a lot of effort into supporting Councillor Birch on this. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Go for it,
Thank you.
Councillor Birch.
So this report is to seek agreement to declare a statement of intent that enables the council to participate in the Energy Company Obligation Scheme, known as Eco4 and Eco4 Flex. So, as you all know, energy usage in homes is a significant contributor to our county's climate impact. Median CO2 emissions for existing homes in Monmouthshire are 3.7 tonnes per year, as against 1.7 tonnes for new homes, which puts us 210th out of 335 local authorities. Fuel poverty is also a significant contributor to ill health, raising the risk of everything from childhood asthma to strokes, heart attacks, and falls in the elderly population. Household money that is spent on energy, particularly in these high cost days, is money not spent in the local economy. In fact, it's money for many people not available for the essentials of life. And these are just some of the reasons why home energy efficiency should be an area for vigorous action in Monmouthshire, not just for social rented homes, but for the majority of homes in the county, which are in the private sector. In fact, home ownership without a mortgage is the most common tenure in our county. So our aim is that every household has easy access to independent, reliable energy efficiency advice, to trusted and accredited contractors for home energy improvements, and to financial help if needed to carry them out. And in the current financial climate, we are relying on bringing in external funding to achieve these aims. So the first building block in achieving that aim was to integrate energy efficiency advice into the Money Matters Advice Partnership, and to increase the rate of referrals into the NEST scheme for households and benefits. And this was achieved in the autumn during the ready for the heating season. And I'm delighted that quite a number of residents have taken advantage of that. And therefore, we now have people who we know are eligible for the scheme that we're now signing up to. So this next building block is this report, confirming that Monmouthshire households will have access from this year to Eco4 and Eco4 Flex funding for works, which can include internal and external insulation, solar PV, and the replacement of oil or solid fuel heating with heat pumps. So this is a scheme fully funded by energy companies and delivered by accredited installers, and it's available to households on low to middle incomes, not just those on benefits, but up to household earned income of 31,000, living in homes which are the least energy efficient, which in Monmouthshire will largely be pre-1980 homes which are not on the gas network. So our rural residents. We've been working with the Cardiff Capital Region to bring forward a regional delivery scheme. I'm very sorry.
I like your ringtone.
I'm sorry, we've been working with the Cardiff Capital Region to bring forward a regional delivery scheme, and will continue to do so. But in order to maximise the benefit to Monmouthshire residents, we've also left the way open to work with local installers and other partners. And we plan to develop and publicise a register of suitably accredited installers. But the onus will always be with the householder to ensure that they're happy with the contractors they choose to have to work on their property. So the council's role will be to publicise the availability of the measures and to sign off household eligibility for the funding, a responsibility which for the moment will sit with the decarbonisation team. So having signed this off and putting in place that that register of installers and inviting installers to be on that register, then comes the challenge of making households, particularly the most vulnerable households, aware of this opportunity. And I hope that councillors representing rural wards and our community councillors will help to get the word out and to reassure people that the offer of free home improvements is not a scam. I know our officers will be keen to make this a whole council approach, with information going to the hubs, to social workers and to anyone who visits rural residents. And we'll continue to try and secure funding for more independent energy advice in the county to help people through the process. We all know how stressful having home improvements done can be. Energy costs are now a huge part of many people's budget, so I hope we can get the maximum number of improvements completed before the next winter and start to bring bills and our climate impact down.
Thanks, Councillor Birch. It does bring a smile on my face because it's something so positive. Does any councillor, and I can see that Councillor Frick's very eager to come in here.
Yeah, I'd just like to say how pleased I am that this is moving forward, Councillor Maybe and Councillor Birch, because as you've stated, Sarah, it's such a big part of people's outgoings at the moment.
Yeah.
So this really will help contribute both to our inequality, reducing inequality objectives, but also to our decarbonisation and our aims to really tackle the climate and nature emergencies. So I'm really pleased that we're doing this and it's moving forward. It's, yeah, a bright light in these rather sombre, difficult times.
Thanks, Councillor Fuchs. Councillor Maybe, you'd like to come in.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to support what Councillor Birch said, and how pleased I am that we've got to this point, and really just to add that we've had to make some quite courageous decisions to crack on. We really wanted to wait for the regional programme to be ready for delivery, and we still want to work regionally. However, regional and national programmes for retrofit, they can of course bring benefits, but they also risk that if you can't guarantee the level of activity for your territory, because energy efficiency obligated suppliers will always focus on where it's most cost effective for them to take action. And so I am personally, from my background experience, relieved that we've managed to keep open the work with local installers, because I think, as the leaders pointed out, there's a generation of employment and economic activity, but I also think we have much more chance of intense delivery in our area as opposed to just in the big cities. So I'm really grateful to Councillor Birch and to officers for holding their nerve and to working through this and saying, right, we can do both of these things. And I think it will be potentially the basis for increased delivery over the period of our administration, hopefully, as we build upon success with this. So thank you for doing it. Great.
Thanks, Councillor Maybe. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Leader, and thanks. That sounds an incredible initiative that everybody's been working on for so long, and it's come along. Can you just let me know? I'm really looking forward to getting this information out to residents. How would they go about, and when will it be ready to actually go out and say to people, right, you can go to this place or whatever? Just practical information, please.
The eligibility, the crucial thing from point of view of the eligibility is the council signing off the statement of intent. I think we have to, after this meeting, wait 5 days before it can go on the website.
To publish the decisions, the work tomorrow will be in effect from next Thursday.
So from next Thursday, the statement of intent and eligibility can go onto the website. People can start talking to installers. Installers can start promoting to residents. I'm aware that that's already happened. Anybody who spends time on Facebook will probably find that it's being targeted for home energy improvements. And some of those will be through Eco4 and Eco4 Flex. In terms of a more structured promotional campaign, that is something where we need to work with the comms team.
Thank you.
And can I just say how helpful it has been to have a nationally known expert in this field on the cabinet working alongside us on this. It's been yeah.
Don't look surprised, Councillor John. From where we're sitting, she's next door to you on the screen. Well, thank you. And thank you once again. I think we're looking, I certainly, as a rural councillor, I'm looking forward to this being rolled out. I'm sorry, Councillor Griffiths, I know you nodded. And
I just wanted to make a contribution as the cabinet member responsible for the local economy, and to say how much I welcome this. It's clearly an opportunity for local residents, and we need to market that. But what I want to share is the thought that it is a huge opportunity and challenge for local suppliers. And what I would like is to ensure that the economic development part of our local authority is thoroughly engaged in this, so that we can make all the relationships as we can with potential local suppliers, so they understand the opportunity and that they can grow into this role. It won't happen automatically, and there's a job of work to be done to foster that.
Yes, I think you're right, and skills development in the local construction sector, I think, is something where we probably should be working with Cardiff Capital Region. but also with training and professional bodies.
Thank you. We have three recommendations, which I think you've clearly laid out, Councillor Birch. It's to agree with the publication of the statement of intent, which we look to see well on the way by next Thursday. And I'm sincerely hoping that most councillors across the council will be free next Thursday so they can push this forward. But that we'll also develop an approved list of qualified and experienced companies, bearing in mind the caveat from Councillor Griffiths here. And I think we are well aware that this is yet another case of where working in partnership so much benefits us as a council and benefits our residents, because that kind of nurturing and support we can't do on our own. And we need to bring in partners and skill sets which we wouldn't necessarily want to keep in council, but recognise are needed. And thirdly is to delegate authority to the chief officer in consultation with Councillor Birch. And given what you've done so far, I think that's a done deal, really, to carry on. But are we agreed those recommendations?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, everybody. That concludes the meeting for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And once again, happy St. David's Day. And could Cabinet stay behind for a few minutes? Thank you. See you all tomorrow, by the way.
See you tomorrow.